Are rates going up this September? Here's what you need to know. Well, today on DeLaat's Thoughts, we're going to go over some predictions of what we should expect this coming September with the potential interest rate hike. First, I'd like to start off with some interesting data that I've received. I always am doing some preliminary studies into some stats and everything like that. For Canadians as a whole, I read something that's very, very interesting. And what this report said was that 59% of Canadians don't even know what the Bank of Canada rate is. And for those of you who don't know, it's 5%. It went on to say as well that 2/3, approximately 68% of Canadians wouldn't even know if the rate went up in September, what their next payment would be. So that's a little frightening when we're dealing with these interest rates and affordability, that the general Canadian actually doesn't even know what the Bank of Canada rate is or how it will even affect them. Well, guys, you got to pay attention to these types of things. There's a lot going on in the world, and right now these interest rates are because of inflation. So I'm going to do a little rewind here for a second, and I'm just going to do a little recap of how the year started. So we start the year off in January, February with these raising interest rates, and they kind of come out, the government and the banks kind of come out and say, look, we're not going to do anything with the rates till September, October. Well, what that did was gave a little confidence in the real estate market. And what we noticed was that March, April, and May, the real estate market started to fire, and it was starting to fire at full cylinders. And that's because when people hear that there's going to be no interest rate hike, it kind of gives them confidence, as well as an understanding that, hey, everything's kind of copacetic, everything's even keel. So that did create a little buzz in the real estate market. Well, then as time kind of went on, the government and the Bank of Canada started to reevaluate things. So come June, they raised the interest rate 0.25%. Come July, they raised the interest rate 0.25%, therefore now making the Bank of Canada rate 5%. So what you need to know in regards to that is, and this is my personal opinion and perspective, I know we're fighting inflation. The government and the economists are trying to do their best to kind of figure out and make this work and get us to where we need to be. But my other thought is this, is that the government did not want the real estate market to fire at all cylinders. And the best way to calm a real estate market is to raise interest rates. What it does is reduces buyers' borrowing power, as well as the interest rate goes up, borrowing power goes down, prices come down. And the government is really trying to kind of keep prices down, and again, battling these interest rates was a way to go. So the government continues to contemplate raising interest rates. So another interesting fact in all of this was, again, we talk about how these interest rates are affecting buyers and their buying power. Well, what about the general Canadian who owns their house and is dealing with raising interest rates, okay? And here's an interesting statistic. So across Canada, 0.15% of people are in arrears of their mortgage, okay? So there's about 5.1 million mortgages in Canada as a whole, and about 7,600 are in arrears, meaning that they're beyond 3 months or more in payments, okay? And to be honest, that number's low. To put it in perspective, in June of 2020, when the pandemic hit, the arrears rate was at 0.27%, okay? So therefore, much, much higher, and and that was a much different situation because of the pandemic. But another interesting thing is that I believe arrears is highest in Saskatchewan at over 50%. I think it's 0.57%. In Alberta, it's at 0.32%. But in our highest populated provinces, Quebec and Ontario, Quebec's at 0.11%. And Ontario is at 0.08%. So it looks as though Canadians are able to kind of weather the storm through these interest rate hikes, which was quite surprising to me. I never looked at that aspect of the mortgage rates. I personally thought and assumed that it was actually going to be much higher. So they definitely are watching that, but with these arrear levels being low, it still gives them confidence that they still have room to raise these rates. Now, again, discussing inflation, inflation is really why they're raising these rates, okay? And I got to be honest, I read lots of different things, and the reports, you don't know who to believe. Everyone's got their own opinion. But from what I'm understanding, at least right now, inflation was at about 2.8% in June. And that was a nice number for the government and the Bank of Canada. That was a really attractive number to them. They were anticipating hopefully 3%, but it's looking like it's at 3.3%, okay? So inflation levels are going up a little bit again. Part of that is gas, part of that is energy. And there's another huge measure, which we're going to discuss in a couple seconds. But with that being said, the inflation rate's rising to 3.3%. You might think to yourself, well, geez, they need to get it under control. They are going to raise the rates come September. I'm cautiously optimistic that they're actually going to hold the rates. I'll tell you this much, if you think the rates are going down, they ain't going down for a while. But come September, I think the bank's going to hold the rate, let the other two rate hikes kind of take its course and kind of see what happens. Because at the end of the day, the other thing is they want the economy to slow, and there is other economic factors out there that are showing a slowing economy, which I think will satisfy the government's needs to actually put a hold on the rate come September. The other thing, which I want to discuss, was one of the highest inflationary measures, interest rates, home interest rates, okay? And so you kind of sit there and you scratch your head and you're wondering to yourself, well, how can they keep raising the rates then if this is one of the huge inflationary measures that is increasing, okay? So that's another thing they really have to watch. Again, the cost of our housing is going up exponentially because of these interest rates, the cost to borrow the money to pay for our houses. So that is one of the huge inflationary measures that's kind of above and beyond. So again, they're watching that. So I think they may keep a hold come September. So very interesting things going on, but at the end of the day, cautiously optimistic, September, rates hold, and we're going to have a wonderful spring market.